Good morning. It's been a while since I've streamed, but today we're gonna talk about something that I've recently learned that I really appreciate, and that is the regular expression match function. And it's something that somebody on the Cabinet Vision forums showed me, but as I understand it, um, this is actually a fairly common thing in the world of programming. It's a function that I think is utilized in many different pieces of software. And specifically, this works in Combit to search for, any specific sort of letters, numbers, characters, spaces, things of that nature in a string. And so one of the things that has historically been challenging for me working with the reports is was the fact that I didn't really have a good way that I knew of to reference wildcards. And I think what this regular expression match function is really doing for me in my limited understanding is helping me introduce the use of wildcards. So when I need to find like a very specific part of a string from a large array that is filled with, just all sorts of different things, without that, without the ability to introduce wildcards, it makes it a lot more difficult. So specifically, if we kind of think about door labels and drawer front labels. So this 1A, 1BL, 1BR. So not only are these in a different format in terms of, this is just a 1 and an A, and then down here we've got a dash and a third character, but also this is not always going to be 1, and as we can see, it's not always going to be A. This could be, 2, 3, 4, obviously. And so what we've got here is a situation where it's difficult to just specify the label in a report. And one of the other things, really, you might be thinking, why are you even talking about this? If you've spent time trying to get part parameters into the S2M Center, then you'll probably understand why I'm talking about this. But if you're really only familiar with the reports within Cabinet Vision itself, we can get labels very easily with the reports in Cabinet Vision. So in terms of what I'm going to talk about here today, like it's not really related. I guess is the best way I could say this, because again, just we can get labels no problem in Cabinet Vision. So this is more about trying to get specific part parameters at the S2M Center. So we did a stream a while back. David Slane really did the stream, and I just kind of was here asking questions and following along with everybody. But we worked out, we worked through a few UCSs to add some operations to the backside of doors and drawer fronts, and then to oversize some of the parts and get it to the S2M Center for trim, to trim the door down to the appropriate size, to finish size rather. And essentially, when you go through the motions of making that happen, and maybe there's a better way to do this, but I don't think so. I haven't really been able to find a way to do this. But when you take a door to the S2M Center, and I need to make my lumber wider because I don't ever do this. This is just a really good example of this function's use, but we genuinely do not do this. So I kind of have a little bit of a, oy, come on, a little misclick there, bear with me. I kind of have this set up just so I can get to show this demonstration, but again, I don't really do this. But when you are using the setting from Cabinavision to send doors with operations as slabs to the S2M Center, you get the name of the door. So, we buy out 5-piece doors from a company called Caldor. And so I've got my doors in our software set up to have the names of their products. And you'll notice it's the selection of my door. If I were to go back to the room and check the doors out, they would be called Caldor Revere Door and Caldor Revere Drawer. Now, I suppose at this point I could maybe sit here and manually sort of type out my labels on these parts, but you still don't really have a good way of knowing what the labels are, and that would be super tedious. And so when we streamed before about this, David shared with us a UCS to drive the label to the comment field, it's a spectacular solution. I really have nothing against that solution, and it works really well. But okay, so well, thanks for stopping by for a little bit anyway. Anyhow, so the only issue with driving the label to the comment before sending it to the S2M Center is that prevents you really from utilizing the comments field on your own, unless you kind of jump through some other hoops. There's ways around it, but essentially that kind of requires some other UCSs to drive notes to, like different places at different times. It's not like impossible to do, but if you don't have to, it's better not to. If we don't have to write a UCS to send this information through different channels to get the data where we want it, that's best. The fewer UCSs we have customizing things, and the fewer just hoops we jump through to get to where we want, the better off we are. It's great that we can build these sort of crazy ways of doing things when there isn't a standard way of doing it, but I really try to promote use the system tools when you can, use the parameters that come with the software whenever possible. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and generate these operations. And just to be clear, there's no user created standard doing anything yet. I wrote just a little one to put this operation here on the back of the drawer front to include the drawer front for the demo here. But my doors just have their hinges on them. So there's really no UCS at play yet. This is just taking some doors. I've got an option selected to send doors with operations to the S2M Center as slabs. That's just a settings. It's just a Cabinavision preference setting. So there's no UCS doing anything yet where we are. And so we've got these different doors here, right? And if I go look at my reports, I've got the part printout legacy landscape selected. So I've got a copy because you can't edit any of the standard ones, and really you can't create new reports. So I just copied this. Which one was it? I think this is the one here. Part 03 is the one that I copied. So just to kind of, I think this report is actually kind of screwed up. I had to do a fair amount of work on it to get the information to move up where it needed to be. Just because it's a legacy part printout, a lot of the report stuff is in the wrong spots, but this is the report that I started with, just so there's no confusion. And as you can see, it's essentially the same report, but again, I just kind of worked on this information to get it up into view on the report the way it should be. So as you can see on my report here that I worked through, I already have the label coming through. And this looks exactly the same as it did when we went through this on stream a while back with David. But again, the mechanism for getting it here is the different thing. And what is valuable about this, I suppose, other than just using as much of this sort of system stuff as we can without jumping through hoops, is now we can type in whatever comment we want on the door, and that's a very easy field to get to show up here. We can pull comments to the S2M Center very, very easily. It's the other parameters that tend to be difficult. So let's go, before we get into this, I'm going to go back to the report properties and kind of show what's going on here. So I did have to, I think I had to import the door labels, but they might have been here. I can't really recall specifically. But if I did import them, it's just a simple sort of import, right? You would find your door labels, and I think actually it's not CX materials. I think it's just a moment. I think this is report MDB. And labels. Okay, so I did do this import, it looks like, and it's not just a door labels table, but it looks like I grabbed door ID, cabinet ID, door number, door name, type, hinge, etc., etc. You guys can read. But the real important part here, I think, is probably label and maybe like door ID and cabinet ID, so that you can pull this into your parts table. But I'm not going to do another import. Because I didn't have to change anything about this query. I didn't have to change anything about the default query from this report. So again, I'm trying to make it very clear that like nothing so far is really customized, except geez, why did I pull these in? I don't know. Anyway, as you can see here, all I've really done is I've selected Parts.Parameters. Oh, that's right. That's right. So I am recalling now. Again, I apologize. This is still very new for me, and when I put this together earlier in the week, it was kind of like a. When I got to the end, I was pretty excited about it, and I really wanted to talk about it, but I kind of also wanted to just save it for the stream. So I'm a little fuzzy on how I got here, but I recall now that I brought these labels in so that I could have this just to use as a reference. I believe that that's exactly what I was trying to do, is just kind of reference this information. So anyhow, the only thing I modified with my parts table in this report is I added this parameters, this Parts.Parameters field, if you will. So if you go to the parts table, it's just this right here, Parts.Parameters. So before I copied the report and came in to edit it, it just didn't have this. And so Parts.Parameters is essentially what brings all of the different parameters that exist on a part into the S2M Center. And so for these doors, because I don't really use many UCS on doors, to be honest, I don't really have many attributes on doors, at least not these 5-piece doors. Most of my stuff is on like slabs, because we make slab doors, so that's what I want to kind of work with. But for these 5-piece doors that are buyouts, we don't really have many attributes on them. So this is maybe not the best example ever, but I do at least have 2 attributes here to kind of help demonstrate how to use this regular expression match function to your advantage. So when I first saw this parameters field, honestly, I didn't really understand what I was looking at. It's a lot of information that's kind of confusing. But when I took some time to sort of just really study it, just slow down for a little bit, I did start to notice, and for what it's worth, the first time I saw this attribute, it was like on one of my other parts that has like a bajillion parameters on it. And this also carries, as far as I can tell, any modified system parameters will show up here as well. So like SDJ, I think on a shelf would show up here if you modified it, things of that nature. So all sorts of different parameters will come through here. But at one point I did notice that one of my named parameters was here, ACC underscore whatever. And that's what kind of brought my attention to it and helped me understand, okay, this actually is our parameters. At first it didn't look like it was, but it is. It's just not every parameter, it's not dx, dy, dz and all of that. It's like the parameters that we edit that are not your standard 9 parameters. So this top one for my drawer front is really, really easy. Underscore label is the default system parameter for labeling doors and drawer fronts. And so as you can see, this is, underscore label equals, hashtag or # S, which I've guessed at what that means, and then 1A. And so if you'll recall from earlier when we were looking at the elevation of my cabinet, 1A is the label of my drawer front. So if we look down here to this next one, we see, underscore label equals #S 1B-L, and then the next one 1BR, and then down here again, because I had a door, on an assembly off to the right of the first cabinet that I had there. This is just a single door rather than a pair of doors. So again, the label is just 1A. So how do I separate this information, this 1A, 1BL, 1BR, etc., from the rest of it? You use regular expression match or regular expression substitute. So you can see that I've got these parameters in here, but you don't do the work in your query. It's not done here in the report properties. We will actually do this in the design report area. So the first attempt I made at this, I definitely failed. I tried originally to just jump in here and use the regular expression in here. And I kept getting, it was like, depending on how I wrote it, because it was, it's kind of hard to explain without actually going through it, because it was in general a fairly confusing affair for me. But what I was trying to check for was, is there a hyphen or a dash in the label or not? Because the way I had to write the regular expression match was checking for wildcards, but again, I don't know enough about this to be able to do it in just one regular expression. And so I'm going to go ahead and just open up my user variables. And what I ended up doing, you'll see here, is I've got a door label and I've got a paired door label. And these can be named whatever you want, right? I just made these names up when I was testing this, but this door label technically works for anything that does not have a hyphen in the name. And so I was doing my testing here, and you can kind of see here, this is this is the first attempt I was making at essentially trying to say, you know, if the match has a hyphen in it, then display that match. If it doesn't have a hyphen in it, then display the match that does not have a hyphen. And I realize, finishing up saying that, that's probably sort of hard to follow, but this right here is, I guess, I don't even really know. It's a wildcard. It's a representation of an alphanumeric wildcard. Is exactly what this is. So for anybody who is at all familiar with the use of cabinet vision wildcards, we've got a question mark or an asterisk, right? And a question mark will replace up to one character. And so it could be an A, a B, a C, a D, blah, 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 right? It could be numbers as well. And the asterisk in Cabinet Vision's wildcard system is basically a representation of any number of characters. So it could be, you know, it just anything, literally anything. So this that I've got highlighted here in the regular expression function is what I would say is the closest thing I could find to a question mark in Cabinet Vision's wildcard system. So ALNUM is basically alphanumeric, and let me close this real quick. And this just kind of all right. So down here, RegEx101.com. This is a website that the individual who kind of introduced this function to me told me to go to learn about this, to sort of try to comprehend what this function's all about. Because honestly, there's not very much help in Combit for it. The tooltips for it are not very good, to be honest. And I think the first few times I saw this function, I read through it and I basically ended up saying, well, that's nice, I guess. I have no idea what I even just read. I don't know how to use this. I'm going to try to find something else that will do what I'm trying to do. But if we go to regex101.com, this is it's a little bit daunting, to be honest, but essentially there is a version of this for regular expression substitute or regular expression match. And what I'm doing here is matching, not substituting, because I don't understand how to substitute, to be honest. I think substituting would be much better, but again, because of my limited understanding, I'm working with match. So down here in this sort of quick reference area, you've got these different categories, and depending on which category you select, you've got a list of different, I think these are technically called tokens, but I don't know for sure. But yeah, so right, common tokens, general tokens, etc. So these are the different ways that you can specify what about your string you're trying to match. So if you click on one of these things, again, I'm sorry, I still don't even understand this well enough to comprehend what this is trying to tell me. So sorry for anybody else who is equally confused, but I don't know, fortunately, I was able to kind of glance through this stuff, and eventually I think I ended up, yes, I clicked on all tokens. I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna try to read through these and see if there's something I can find that will work for what I'm trying to do. And I found this, letters and digits. So this is an alternate way to match any letter or digit. equivalent to a to z 0 to 9. So apparently this is the longhand way to write this. And this would include all capital letters A through Z, all lowercase letters A through Z, and all numbers, or all integers, 0 through 9. So this part at the end here, /G, I'm not entirely certain Combit uses this. I think that this might be something that, I don't know, Combit probably could use it or something. I don't understand how to utilize it. But this is some sort of reference to, like, I think they refer to it as groups. And again, I'm sorry I'm doing a horrible job of this. I have no background with this. I've just tinkered with it enough to get it to do what I need for this. And I'm just trying to share. So ultimately, at the end of the day, after I sort of messed around with this for a while, I found this wildcard, if you will, and started kind of messing around with the parameter. So let's get back in here and go back to this test. So Parts.Parameters, and unfortunately, because I have a draw front in here, and because of the way Combit works, I am only getting to test this on the draw front, if you will. So I think for the sake of this, I'm gonna actually back out of here, drop the draw front from the optimization, and come back in with just a door, because I think that it'll be a more useful experience for anybody who is trying to sort of learn and understand this. Oops. Helps if you edit it rather than just clicking OK. All right, so back to this. All right, so Parts.Parameters, right? So how do we kind of start, if you will? Well, if you kind of look through some of my examples down here, I started by trying to isolate, label underscore label equals hashtag s or pound s. And so I actually started with this by just doing this, right? And once I kind of got here, I realized, all right, so I think I'm understanding something about how this works. Now, there's a couple of different options. This right here is the group part of this that I was talking about before that I don't fully understand. If you leave this option out, I guess it returns the group index. And since I don't know what the group index is or how it might, I think it's just a more complex, a more advanced use of this, probably the correct use of this, to be honest. But if you just put (0), that is going to return the matching string. So whatever it is that we've typed in here, as you can see, is going to return it. So you can just keep on going with this, right? And so at this point, I have gotten to a point where I've managed to actually just from the whole Parts.Parameters array pull just underscore label equals pound s. Not in and of itself very useful. And so this is when I went off hunting for wildcards, right? How do I get a wildcard in here? How can I make this a little more flexible for me with my limited understanding. And so that's when I found the A, L, and UM, right? And what do you know, right? As soon as I tried typing it in there, I got that next sort of bit of the array that I was looking for, the first part of my label, if you will. And I'd like to pause for just a minute to try to, this feels really abstract right now while I'm talking about it, and I'd like to pause for just a minute and try to explain what the goal here is for me and how this could actually be used for other parameters. What I'm trying to do with this is if I have an array that lists 30 different parameters, getting the exact parameter I'm looking for is difficult. But usually when we're reporting, we are only looking for one specific parameter or maybe a couple of different parameters, right? And so because we know what we've named our parameters, if we can find a way to pull just the name of that parameter followed by, you know, some specific rule that we can think of or something like that for how many different characters we want, or if we can say that I want to pull all of the numbers and letters from a string that exist between the $s and the next pipe that exists, which would be the separating character, the delimiter for the Parts.Parameters array, then you can effectively target exactly the parameter you're looking for and pull exactly the value from it that you're trying to find. And that's what I'm trying to work towards here. So again, to just go back to what I was saying before, these pipes, if you'll notice, here is one whole parameter, and then there is a delimiting or separating pipe between this parameter and the next parameter. And so if you had many different parameters, you'd have many different pipes. And so because we know the name of the parameter we're looking for, and we know at the very end of the value we're looking for there's going to be a pipe, we can start to pull the data exactly the way we want it. So that's what we're trying to do here. So if I can get this to pull exactly what I'm looking for here, at this point now, I can, and this is really where I say I think somebody who was more proficient with the use of this function would use the regular expression substitute rather than regular expression match. But I don't know, maybe they wouldn't. It's hard for me to say because I don't know it super well. But at this point, what I can do now is I can use string substitute to pull the stuff out of this that I don't want to see, which is the underscore label equals, you know, $s or whatever. And that's kind of what you see me doing down here. So string substitute, in case you are unfamiliar with the function, it replaces strings in the string of the first argument, which is a little bit confusing if you're not familiar with this. So what the example here is saying is the first string, which is included in it, which is the, you know, hello world, and between these quotes is the first string, which is each of these arguments again is separated by a comma. Hello world, we want to look for LL, and we want to replace it with NN. Now, notice this does not replace the one L of world. It leaves it. It's only replacing exactly what's in the string with exactly what the third argument has, right? So replaces strings in the string of the first argument. First argument, we're replacing this string with this string. So what we want to do is we want to, this underscore label equals S1B is going to be the string that we are going to start with. And then our string that we're going to search for to replace is going to be underscore label equals £s. And we are going to replace it with nothing. So string substitute, that's the first string. So you just put a comma there to kind of say that's the string I'm trying to substitute from. Now I want to get rid of, let's just say for now, I'm going to start with this and say I just want to get rid of label. Now, notice the little tooltip that pops up here. At this point, I can either put a comma for the next string, or if we leave that third parameter blank, it will simply delete this. So I could say, all right, I want to replace label with nothing, and that works. But since we're just trying to delete it anyway, it's best to just leave that comma out, as indicated here again, right? String that should be replaced. It's sort of highlighting the placement of the string in the function, if you will. This is the string that should be replaced, or if the third parameter is blank, deleted. So we want to get rid of this, and that's exactly what's happening. If you look down here, we don't see label any longer. So we know label's not going to change. We know equals is not going to change. These are not variables. They are, underscore label is the name of the parameter. It will always be that. The equal sign is just kind of part of the way this Parts.Parameters field works. And then, pound, for whatever reason, that's just part of the Parts.Parameters thing. Now this next part, S. As far as I can tell, S stands for system. And I think that it is referencing system parameters specifically. I've seen M for measurement. I'm nearly positive. I'm pretty sure B is Boolean, but I'm really guessing with this. The help file has not been very helpful. I actually think it's blank for this part of the help file. I'm not sure why, but go figure. But my best guess is that S stands for system. And again, just to kind of test. This one here is a measurement, and it's M, 0.00000, right? So if it was I, my assumption is that that would be like an integer parameter. B for Boolean, I don't know what they do for like the difference between degree and decimal, but that's what I've been able to gather so far. S is for system parameter, M is for measurement parameter. So I'm fairly positive that you cannot change the label of your doors and drawer fronts. I think that is something that will always be system generated. If anybody watching knows whether or not that's true, go ahead and chime in. But I'm fairly certain you can't actually change system parameters or change labels. I think it's just generated by the system and you get what you get. So what that means is we don't need to use a wildcard here. We can just add S. And you'll notice down in the lower left, all we're left with is the label. So using regular expression match, we were able to pull, a good chunk of what we needed out. by specifically searching for the name of the parameter you're after, you start the match process, and then you can use wildcards, or again, there's other ways of doing this, but for this one, because we know labels will never be really more than, like, I mean, if you have 10 doors or more, 10 faces or more, you could get up to like face 10A, 11A, 12A, and in that case this would fail. But I know that, well, first of all, this is just an example to kind of help share what I've learned about regular expression, but I also know that for me, we don't do that. We won't have a label that's 10 ever. Or, I mean, if we do, I'll be really surprised. So this is great, but what about the part where we've got like a pair of doors and there's a hyphen? This will fail on catching that hyphen. In fact, it probably is already, right? Because 1B is not the rest of this. So we can type the hyphen in, and since it's showing up, we know that it does exist in there. And then we can just place another one of these in here. So if I were to say, okay, I want to look for another wildcard, I'm not going to get anything. There's no match because there isn't another character after L before the pipe delimiter. And since the pipe delimiter is not alphanumeric, it's not showing up. And it's not going to pick up anything else after this because the next part of it failed, so far as I understand. Now, just to show as an example, if I put a pipe, it still isn't showing up. I have a feeling there's probably a specific, there's either a specific character to reference that, or Combit knows that that is a delimiter and it's not actually information included in Parts.Parameters, so we can't get it anyway. But either way, so how do we get this to a point to where we can use this and pull for both single faces where there would not be a hyphen and pairs of faces where there will be a hyphen? This was one of a few different attempts. Again, I kind of already talked about this a little bit, but this is basically saying, you know, here's a string substitute that I had up here, but you know, I'm saying if RegExMatch blah 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 equals blank, right? If the results of this regular expression match return nothing, then that tells me it's not a single door. It's going to be a pair of doors because it's going to have a hyphen in it, right? So if what returns from this query, if you will, is 0, then I'm going to check again. If it's not that, is it this? And if it's not, then I probably did something wrong, and I'm actually just going to return error. That was me working through this, trying to figure out what's going on, because I couldn't get it to work at first, honestly. But then again, over here is the final portion of the if, you know, if it's not this and it's not this, then it's an error. Otherwise, you know, it's probably this first one is sort of how this works out. But it failed, as you can see here. The logic, I'm very confident that I wrote this correctly. Maybe I didn't, but yeah, in this particular case, I did not. I think, again, because I was testing something. So I think what happens, for whatever strange reason, is written in this order, it will work for pairs, but it will never show a single door, is what I was running into. And I kind of flipped back and forth, and I settled on, okay, something about this, I don't know. I don't know what's going on with this. Why it's only showing like, well, I'll just show you guys. Frankly, there's no reason for me to kind of talk around it. So we see this is returning correctly 1b-l, right? What was the name of that? I can't remember that. Sorry. RegExMatch test 2 is what I called it. All right, so everything looks like it's working, right? I've got 1BL showing up. One BL, one BR, but I don't have a label here. And so I don't really understand what is breaking down, because I know if I switch the order around a little bit and rewrite that, I will get the single door labels to show up on the single doors, but the pair door labels will not show up on the pair doors. And when I got to that point, I was a little bit frustrated, but I don't know, I wasn't ready to give up yet, and I came up with a solution that is, I don't know, I don't really want to call it clever, I guess, but I think that it works out for me pretty well. So what I did was I wrote this, basically I simplified it. And again, you can see here how much of this just kind of testing back and forth I was going through, trying to figure out, why is this not working? Why can't I get it to work? But what I settled on was creating two different user variables. And rather than trying to check for one or the other, I just named one of them a door label, and then I named the other one a pair of door labels. And so it's each of these individual regular expression matches with a string substitute. One of them includes the hyphened label for the for the pair doors, and one of them does not. So again, this is my single door label. And if we look at the pair door label, obviously I did not do testing here. At this point, I had decided this was how I was going to go with it. But so this is showing my pair door labels. The other one is for my single doors. And the way I worked this out was simply, what I was able to determine is if my regular expression match fails, I end up with a null value. So if the pair door label is null, use the door label. Otherwise, use the pair door labels. And so this way, I've got two separate user parameters that are not failing depending on the order that I've written them in. One will always pull a pair of door label if it exists, and one will always pull a door label if it exists. And then I've used this little if function to display whichever one exists, because they'll never both exist. It either has a hyphen or it doesn't. And so this was really what ended up working out. And if you take a look, we've got 1BL, 1BR, and 1A. So, I know that we, again, just at the start of the stream, I just like to iterate once more. We already managed to get here using door comments once before. So it's not like there wasn't another way to do this. But to be completely honest, while working on a report for somebody, an unrelated report, they were asking me for some help with getting the comments that they make on their doors to their door report, um, which was not in the S2M Center. So I worked with them and we got it all set up so that they could write a comment on their door and it would make it to their report. And when they started testing the report out, we realized, well, darn, okay, we've got this other UCS, and it was based on the stream that David and I did actually. And because that UCS was forcing the label into the comment field for the door, the report that I was helping that other person with was not working because they could never type a comment since the UCS was putting its own comment of the door label on that part. And so that's actually what really sort of spurred this. It all happened at the right time. I had just been introduced to the regular expression match function when I ran into that problem, and at first my response was, well, this sucks. You know, we're going to have to try to figure out some other thing. But then I got to thinking about it, and what do you know? This worked out. So this is just a really, really simple example of the use. And for me, I need really simple examples when I'm learning something. This is as far as I've been able to get with this on my own. I don't really know enough about it to even be able to ask very many questions, and it's a lot. But I know that it's very powerful, and I also know that there have been countless posts on the Cabinet Vision forums over the years basically asking, how can I get my notes to the S2M Center reports? Or how can I get my parameters? How can I get the information that I want to get by manually entering information on my parts in Cabinet Vision to the S2M Center? And the last time I tried to do something like this, I actually failed completely. This was one of the first things I tried to do when I started streaming, and I didn't go through it on stream. I told the individual who kind of challenged me to do this, I don't know if I can do this, and I tried. I spent a few hours on it and came up with nothing. But if I was challenged to do it again, I would know how, because of this. So I really think that there's a lot that can be done with this. I feel like this is something that I am only really scratching the surface on, and I think that there's going to be some people who take this and do some really cool stuff with it. But this effectively gives you access to all of your part parameters and notes at the S2M Center in a fairly simple way that is really easy to identify what part gets what note. And to sort of like wrap up at the end of the stream, one of the things that is really hard about sending a note to the S2M Center is that the unique identifier that ties the note to the part is lost when it goes to the S2M Center. There is no unique like ID or anything like that on the notes that can relate to the parts ID. There's no relationship there to join the tables. There's no way to get that information to just associate when you try to use the trick that we normally do by sending notes to the report center and Cabinet Vision. When you're sending it to Cabinet Vision, there's that unique identifier that ties the part ID to the note. But again, it's lost when you take that part to the S2M Center. And this is the only way that I have been able to figure out how to get a note into the S2M Center while still maintaining the relationship with the specific part. Again, I didn't join any tables. There was no joining. I just pulled the parts parameters, and it came with the part. It pulls all notes. Yes, yes, it pulls all notes, and then there's no way to relate them. So I'll just kind of show you real quick what I'm talking about. So first of all, you don't get notes by default. You actually have to kind of change your source, or do an import. So the import is the right way to do it. You shouldn't change your source, but you need to import. And it's from report MDB. Your notes. Right, note, prompt, parent type, and parent ID. That's great. Parent ID. 1 and 2 and 6675, right? 6675. If you look over here on my door labels, that's the door ID. And that's great and all, but door labels is an import too. If you look at parts, nowhere on this sort of list of information that came through does that number exist. We don't see the parent type or the parent ID anywhere in this list of parts. And that essentially is the challenge. There's no unique identifying characteristic about them. But that's what makes this so cool. This is already part of that table. It's already part of the parts table. You know, this is like a material list. And they've got parameters over here for it. It's material parameters. But the parts parameters are specific to the parts, and they're already associated. It's like when Cabinet Vision transfers the data over to the S2M Center, there's a table that contains information about the parts, and in that parts table for each part, there is a Parts.Parameters field. So again, there's no association that you need to make. You don't need to join notes onto this because they're already here. Anyway, not to kind of talk in circles, but that is the whole challenge here. That is why this even really matters. That's why this is helpful. You don't need to join your note onto your part. It's already here. So, I feel like I didn't do like the best job in the world ever of talking through this, and I'm sure that there are questions. I'm still, as I've made really clear, I'm still pretty confused in general about the right way to use this. I still think there's probably a much more elegant solution, but this did work. And anybody watching, well, really anybody, I guess. It doesn't matter whether you've got access to eSupport or not. You could, but the problem is that it still doesn't relate it. So specifically here, I'll show you. I've got all these parent types and everything, right? I've got door report note, drawer report note. And these are notes that I've got for Cabinet Vision reports, not the S2M reports. So I actually have the import here with the parent ID and the parent type and the prompt. So to do precisely what you're asking about, just make a new table real quick and show, if I can even remember how to get to showing this. Right, so there's the where or whatever. Let's see. Drawer. or drawer report note. I don't remember what it was called. Right, so obviously that's not going to work. Drawer report note. So then imp note, so that it's included in this select, so that it can show up, right? This is where it breaks down. Because how do I join it? Like, we can't just do it here. It's not going to work. We have to join. So if we're going to try to join all of this stuff, oops. Right, I want to join everything over there. I can look at parent ID, parent type. That's right. Okay, so the only way that I can even get us to the point where I can show you why this is challenging is to join the note to the room and the cabinet and everything there. But what ends up happening is your note, it ends up placing the note on the wrong part, is what I ran into last time I tried to do this, because I think that there is somewhere in there where you try to join based on a value that changes or something like that. I don't know. I'm not giving a very good explanation for this, and yeah, sorry I can't explain better. But even if you were able to take this as it is and join like on the room and the cabinet and everything, so that you could get those two tables actually joined, what ended up happening when I tried this the one time I did was the data preview was all screwed up. I ended up getting the note that I was pulling mixed up. It was just all over the place. It was like I put a note on a partition and it ended up on a shelf. So that was really the challenge there. So anyhow, if anybody has anything specific that they would like to sort of get worked out with this, if you've got a particular parameter that you're trying to get to the S2M Center from Cabinet Vision, and this was not clear enough for you to follow along and make happen, just send me a message. This is something that this is really exciting for me. I was really, really excited to figure this out. It's, again, to sort of just try to summarize, I feel like what this does is this lets me use wildcards when I'm trying to find parameters at the S2M Center on my parts, when all I've got is this gigantic string of all sorts of data that is extremely hard to select precisely what you want. This is a way to say, I want exactly this. The one way that this would be challenging to do would be if the value that exists on the parameter is not so limited to, like, 2 to 4 characters. If we were trying to pull a note that we typed in somewhere, that would be different. It would definitely require a different use of the function, but I don't think that it would be impossible to do. We would probably just need to do some kind of like checking for length of string and figuring out like which instance or where in the comma delimiters a specific parameter showed up, which could be done with a length check, so that you can do the I'm not going to guess at this. there is a function this would be the way that we would go about pulling out a longer string using this. We would have to introduce the mid function, but if you had a variable length string after a specific parameter that was in the middle of your Parts.Parameters array and you wanted to pull that specific value, it is definitely going to be more challenging than what I showed here. If you have a problem like this, or a specific instance where you're trying to do something like this and you would like help, please ask, because I would like an example to work on, and I don't really have a reason to right now, or an example in my particular setup. I'm sure I'll run into it eventually, but right now I don't, and I am really curious about it. So if you run into it and you'd like some help, send me a message or something like that. Or if you just run into it and you solve it and you feel like sharing the solution, that would be really cool too. So yeah, any questions, let me know. Otherwise, that's it. Hey man, of course, you are very, very welcome. If there's one part of cabin division that I think we could all use a little bit of help on, it's this one here. It's been very, very challenging for all of us. So yeah, of course, paying it forward. I would like to credit the person that showed me the function, but I didn't really ask them if I can do that. So if you're on eSupport, you can probably figure it out. But otherwise, if you ever happen to watch the stream, individual that introduced me to regular expression match, thank you kindly. I very much appreciate it. You probably didn't realize what you were doing when you showed me, but this feels like all of a sudden I've been writing reports with one hand tied behind my back, and it is suddenly been freed. I can actually use both of my hands now. This is really, really big for me, so thank you very much. And anybody else, if you, like I said, if you have any questions, you'd like to learn more, let me know. Otherwise, thanks for watching.